I still hear the pop of the Bud Light can in my head, the same sharp little hiss that broke the quiet when my closest friend leaned against my kitchen island and told me, smiling like we were at a tailgate, "If you don't give her what she needs, someone else will." And I laughed then, because it sounded like one of those dumb locker room lines dudes throw around at Cowboys games. Not the opening credits to one of those revenge stories you see trending in Reddit stories, threads with titles that feel too wild to be true. But that was before I'd learned to pay attention to the silence between words, before I could read a whole betrayal in the way a hand sets down a beer. My name's Mark, 37, born and raised outside Dallas, run a small HVAC outfit with 2 trucks, a battered F-150 as our mule, and a garage full of parts I keep telling myself I'll organize after football season. I married Claire in a June that smelled like fresh asphalt and fried pies from the roadside stand near Canton, and we took our engagement photos behind the old diner on Route 80, where the neon PIE sign blinks like a heartbeat when the humidity comes up off the fields. People love to say you can tell a marriage by the first kitchen you share. Ours was a 2-bed, 1-bath starter in Mesquite, with laminate counters that always felt a degree too sticky. The AC sputtered, and I refused to call a tech because I was the tech, and there was something about fixing your own air on a July afternoon, sweat pouring from the brim of your Ranger's cap, that made a man feel like he could keep anything running if he cleaned the coils and gave it time. We met at a church volunteer weekend, me loading cases of bottled water for a tornado relief drive, and her in cut-off shorts and a ball cap, laughing with a group from the college ministry, though she'd been out of school 2 years. Later, we ended up at a cookout with cornhole boards in the driveway and a grill smoking mesquite, and I remember the way Claire tilted her head when she listened, like she was filing every word for later, like I mattered in a room full of louder people. Our early life was Taylor's Tex-Mex on Fridays, queso that always scorched the roof of my mouth, and long drives on empty farm roads with George Strait low on the radio, and her bare feet on my dash as the sun went down behind pump jacks. It was small joys, a second-hand sofa someone's aunt was ditching, a stack of Target frames full of county fair photos and Polaroids from the day I taught her to throw a spiral in the park by the elementary school. My closest friend, the one who would become the headline in my own family drama, was Jake, ran track with me in high school, stuck around after college to help his dad with a small commercial concrete outfit, a guy who always knew where the cold beer was and never missed an opening day at Globe Life Field. The first time he met Claire, he called her a keeper, as if he were naming a play, and the 3 of us fell into a rhythm. Saturday morning breakfast at Waffle House, LSU game days at his apartment where the walls shook from neighbors yelling, and cheap Halloween costumes that made us look like a sitcom trio that hadn't gotten the memo the show was canceled. Back then, if our life was a movie, we were in the part with the montage, the puppy we brought home in a cardboard box, Duke, a blue heeler with tornado eyes, the IKEA bed that tried to murder me with an Allen wrench, the road trip to Galveston where we ate shrimp over plastic tablecloths, and I proposed on the pier with the kind of ring you can only afford when you're 20-something and hopeful. The foreshadowing didn't arrive with thunder. It slid in on gray days, in pauses that didn't used to exist. A phone screen turned a little too far away. An inside joke I wasn't inside of. Claire started saying, "I'm exhausted," the way some people say, "hello." And I chalked it up to work because she'd just been promoted to lead coordinator at an orthopedics clinic out near Plano. The kind of job where you're the bridge all the patients have to cross and you get walked on by shoes that never look at you. Jake, meanwhile, had a way of making our house feel fun when life was too much like a spreadsheet. He'd bring ribs he swore were better than mine. They weren't. He'd play fetch with Duke until the dog collapsed. He'd crack jokes about my driveway jump shot that made Claire laugh in a way I'd started to miss when it was just the 2 of us. Sometimes, late, when the TV was humming ESPN and the room burned soft with the lamp on low, I'd catch them mirroring each other's moves. Same tilt of a shoulder, same half smile at a commercial. And it meant nothing, I told myself. It meant they were friends, because in the movies the ominous music tells you, but in real life, all you get is a flicker of something you don't name. The first real change, the one I remember because I can date it by 2 receipts in my glove box, was the fall afternoon I came home from a long service call in Allen and found Claire sitting on the edge of our bed with a look I didn't know yet. She said she wanted more space, a word that sounded clean like a hotel room, but lived dirty in my ribcage. And when I asked what that meant, she said she needed to feel like a person who wasn't just someone's wife, or the girl who remembered to buy filters for the AC. I said, okay, let's plan a weekend, let's go to Austin, do a little South Congress walking, and eat breakfast tacos at Veracruz. But she shook her head like I'd offered her a Band-Aid for a broken leg. For a while I overcorrected. Flowers from the Kroger that bruised too easily, surprise coffees delivered to her office, a Tuesday night chicken parm that smoked up the kitchen, and dates scheduled like maintenance appointments, because that's how my brain works. If you change the filter and clear the drain line, the unit hums again. But love isn't a condenser coil, and in the quiet that followed, we slowly drifted into that cliché where two people live in one house like polite tenants who pass in the hall. This is the part of the infidelity stories where a narrator would warn you to look closer, where the internet comments would say I should have seen it sooner. But the truth is, I was trying to keep my business afloat after a summer of emergency calls that fried me from the inside. And I clung to the idea that marriages breathe, that you give them room and they come back to you. Meanwhile, Jake's concrete crew landed a big retail pad near Rockwall, and he was around more in the odd way success brings you closer to the people who remember you when you had nothing. He'd swing by with leftover kolaches from a site breakfast, ask if my fantasy team was imploding, tease Claire for rooting for whatever team had the cutest uniforms, and once, this sticks like a tack in my brain, he told me, eyes on the football game, "You ever think some people marry the idea of you and not the person?" I laughed then because it came out of nowhere and sounded like something a guy says after a podcast, but later, in bed, I replayed it and felt a draft under a door I hadn't noticed. The holidays came and went in a blur of casseroles and paper plates. We hosted a New Year's Eve thing where 3 couples stood around our living room holding plastic champagne flutes while the TV in Times Square showed strangers kissing, and I caught Claire watching them with an expression I couldn't read, hunger, grief, a dare, and I put my arm around her shoulders and she leaned into me for a moment. That felt like the old days, before the leaning turned into a flinch. Around February, she started going to a new book club, which struck me as funny because Claire wasn't a joiner, and the only time I'd seen her tear through a novel was on our honeymoon when she speed-read a thriller on the flight to New Orleans. I joked that I needed a book report and she laughed, but her laugh didn't land, like a text that never delivers. On a Sunday morning in March, I woke to the smell of bacon and coffee, the kind of simple grace that makes you believe everything's fixable, and Claire wore my old college hoodie and slid a plate in front of me like we were resetting to a better channel. We ate in the quiet flicker of sunlight, made small talk about Duke's shedding and my mom's stubborn crepe myrtles, and then she looked at me in that careful way people use before they change the subject forever and said, "Jake called. He needs help moving equipment later. I told him you might swing by." And I said sure because that's what I'd always do for Jake. But a small part of me blinked at the detail of the message, at how she carried it like a fragile thing. That afternoon, after lifting 2 plate compactors into his trailer while the wind whipped grit into our mouths, Jake handed me a cold beer and said, "You're a good man, you know." And the way he said it made it sound like a benediction you give the guy you're about to betray. In retrospect, the foreshadowing was everywhere. A pair of earrings I didn't recognize in the console of Claire's car that she said were her coworkers. A run to Target that took 2 hours because checkout lines are insane. A new perfume that smelled like citrus and apology. And Jake's text habits shifting from memes and game trash talk to thoughtful late-night sentences about life and choices that I didn't ask for but got anyway. I kept telling myself that trust means standing on the porch with your hands in your pockets when someone else takes too long to come home. That love isn't a private investigator, that no good story, no moral one, starts with a man rifling through his wife's phone, but secrets hum, and a house knows when it's holding one. The night it finally broke through, my denial started like any other. Monday, rain threatening, the kind of spring storm that sits on the horizon like a decision. I came home early, grease under my nails, an extra order of takeout enchiladas because I wanted to be the man who brings comfort without being asked. And Claire wasn't home, though she said she'd be. Duke paced the window, tail ticking like a metronome, and I flipped on ESPN and pretended to care about a game I didn't. And then something small, stupid, ordinary happened that pressed a finger on the bruise I'd been ignoring. Claire's iPad lit up on the counter with a message preview, just a first name and a half sentence, the kind of thing you could ignore if you wanted a quiet life, the kind of thing that, once read, rewires the rest of your days. I didn't touch it then, I swear I didn't. I stood there with enchilada steam fogging the plastic lid, heart pounding in the blue light of a screen that hummed with a secret like a bad fluorescent bulb. And when Claire finally walked in with rain in her hair and that citrus apology scent clouding the air, she saw where my eyes had been and said, too quickly, "Don't start." Which is how you know the story you're in isn't the one you thought you were telling. Because what I started, right then, right there, wasn't a fight. It was a quiet, careful inventory of the life I loved and the lie I could suddenly smell on its breath. I didn't pick up the iPad that night, not because I was some saint of self-control, but because fear can make a man cautious in strange ways. Instead, I set the enchiladas down, pretended to be more tired than I was, and watched Claire slide past me into the bedroom, with her purse clutched like it held something alive. She said she'd shower, and the sound of water hitting tile gave me time to stare at the screen's black glass. Time to wonder if knowing the truth would burn me worse than not knowing. That's the part of betrayal nobody tells you. Sometimes denial feels like mercy, but silence collects interest, and by the next week, the little oddities grew teeth. Claire's book club nights multiplied, and she started coming home with that same citrus apology perfume so thick it felt like she'd bathed in it. Jake, meanwhile, was around less, at least with me. No rib deliveries, no fantasy league trash talk, just excuses that sounded rehearsed, like lines in a play where I wasn't cast. Then came the receipt. I keep my truck clean the way some men keep journals. The glove box has all the gas slips, oil change stickers, and receipts from job sites. It's habit, business expense tracking, the kind of thing QuickBooks wants. One Tuesday, I pulled out a wadded pile of receipts to sort, and noticed one tucked among them that wasn't mine. Hyatt Place. Plano, 2 nights, room service for 2, dated smack in the middle of one of her book club weekends. The name on the loyalty number was Jake's. My hands shook so bad I almost ripped it in half. At first, I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe he had some side fling and Claire had just been helping him cover, but my gut already knew better. That's when the detective switch flipped. Not a trench coat, not magnifying glass, just a man with a smartphone, a stubborn streak, and a sick churn in his stomach. I checked our joint credit card statements online. There it was. Target, Sephora, Uber charges from Plano at odd hours. Once, a Grubhub receipt at midnight for sushi. Claire hates sushi. My pulse thudded like a hammer when I noticed the delivery address matched the Hyatt. Still, suspicion isn't evidence, it's smoke. I needed the fire. So, I stopped telling her when I'd be home. I worked odd hours, came back early from jobs, stayed later at the warehouse just to see how she'd react. Each time, Claire grew sharper, jumpier, her phone welded to her hand, the screen tilting away like I'd burn if I saw it. I caught her once on the back porch, whispering into her phone, saying, "Not now, not while he's here." When she turned and saw me in the doorway, she froze, then plastered on a smile too fast, too wide. The smoking gun came courtesy of technology. We'd synced our devices years ago when we thought sharing everything was romantic. I'd forgotten my Apple ID still connected her iPad to my phone. One night, lying in bed, a message popped up while she was showering, from Jake, just one line, "Can't wait to taste you again." My stomach flipped. I scrolled, heart pounding, and there it was. Weeks of filth, plans disguised as book club, motel meetups, even jokes about me, jokes. About my dumb fantasy team picks, about how I still believe in forever like a puppy. Every word was a nail, every emoji a hammer. I didn't explode. I didn't storm into the bathroom with the phone held high. Instead, I screenshot everything, emailed it to myself, and printed the whole thread the next morning at the office on company paper. The stack felt heavier than metal in my hand. I slid it into a folder, tucked it under a pile of invoices, and told no one, not yet. Revenge stories on Reddit make it sound fast and fiery, but in real life, revenge brews slow, like chili left on low heat. It needs time to thicken. Still, the house wasn't quiet anymore. Every move she made felt staged. She started leaving earlier for work, hair done in ways she never bothered with for me, lipstick shades that made her mouth look like someone else's. She'd come home humming, but it wasn't happy. It was distracted, like a person replaying someone else's voice in her head. The worst part? Jake still called me bro whenever we crossed paths. Once at the gas station, I pulled up beside his Silverado, and he leaned out with a grin like the world was still intact. "How's Claire?" he asked, with that sly tilt in his voice. I nearly spit on the pavement, but I kept my mask. I had to. I escalated the investigation, checked mileage on her car, 40 miles extra here, 60 there, Too much for a simple Plano commute. I started keeping a small spiral notebook in my pocket, jotting down times, excuses, little details like the way she'd smell faintly of hotel soap instead of her usual lavender body wash. Duke even seemed to know. He'd sniff her clothes with a confused whine, like he couldn't reconcile the scents. And then the camera. Not a big fancy setup, just a 30-node motion-activated nanny cam I bought off Amazon and disguised as a smoke detector in our den. I told myself it was for home security, but I knew better. The first week, nothing. Then on a Thursday afternoon, while I was supposed to be out on a late service call, the motion alert buzzed my phone. I pulled over in my truck on the side of Highway 75 and opened the feed. Claire, letting Jake in through the back door, both of them laughing like teenagers sneaking into a movie. He kissed her before the door even closed. My throat burned so bad I thought I'd vomit right there in the cab. I recorded it, saved it. That's when suspicion became truth. Truth became evidence, and evidence became a weapon. I didn't confront her that night, or the next. I kept playing the long game, watching, waiting, stacking the file. Screenshots, receipts, camera clips, even her calendar notifications that pinged at odd hours with appointments. I had enough to bury them both socially, legally, morally. But part of me, the part still clutching at the memory of a girl at a church cookout who laughed at my dumb jokes, kept asking if I could salvage anything. That's what betrayal does. It splits you in two. One man wants blood, the other just wants back what he lost. The split ended the night she came home late. Hair messy, shirt buttoned wrong, reeking of cologne that wasn't mine. I asked, calm as I could, "Good book club?" She froze, deer in headlights, then muttered something about traffic. I nodded, poured myself a whiskey, and went to bed without another word. But in my head, the decision clicked into place. No more denial. It was time to stop being the bystander in my own story. The next morning, I slid the folder of printed texts into my truck, tucked the USB drive of footage in the glove box, and thought about how to stage the reveal. Not private, not one-on-one. Betrayal that deep deserved daylight, an audience. I wanted their lies to collapse in public, where everyone could see the truth I'd been living with. As I drove past the diner, where we'd once celebrated her birthday with pancakes and a cheap candle, I realized something that chilled me. The woman I'd married was gone, and in her place was someone who could laugh with my best friend behind my back. And the only thing left now was to make sure neither of them could laugh again at me. That's when the plan began to take shape, and when I decided the confrontation wouldn't happen in whispers, but in a room where their masks couldn't hold. The plan set itself like a trap in my mind, steady, silent, inevitable. I chose Jake's birthday barbecue for the stage, partly because half the town would be there, neighbors, old high school teammates, even Jake's cousins who never missed a reason to drink beer in folding chairs, and partly because it was the last place they'd expect me to strike. In betrayal stories across Reddit, the humiliation moment is always a kitchen table showdown or a private blow-up, but I wanted something bigger, something so undeniable it would echo in every whisper after. That Saturday, the sun burned down on his backyard like an interrogation lamp. Trucks lined the curb, kids chased each other with Nerf guns, and the grill smoked with ribs that Jake bragged about for weeks. Claire was already there when I arrived, dressed in a sundress too bright for her usual taste, smiling like a woman trying on happiness for a crowd. She saw me from across the yard, blinked once, and her smile faltered. Jake, beer in hand, strode up and clapped me on the shoulder like we were still brothers. "Mark, thought you'd bail." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, keeping my voice flat. I carried with me a manila folder and a USB drive tucked in my pocket like twin grenades. The party droned on, kids splashing in a kiddie pool, someone's uncle telling the same fishing story, country music humming from a Bluetooth speaker. I made small talk, nodded through it, all the while waiting for the moment when the noise dulled enough that everyone would hear me. That moment came when Jake tapped him the spoon against his beer bottle and raised his arms. "All right, folks, let's hear it. 38 today, still faster than half of you on the track." Laughter rippled, glasses lifted. Claire beamed at him, and in that beam I saw everything I'd lost. I stepped forward, folder in hand. "Funny thing about birthdays," I said, voice loud enough to cut through the chatter. Heads turned. Jake grinned, confused. Claire stiffened. "It's when people celebrate who you really are, and sometimes the truth shows up with the cake." I flipped the folder open. A stack of screenshots fluttered in the breeze, catching eyes like bait. The first page, big, bold, undeniable, was Jake's text. "Can't wait to taste you again." Gasps cracked the air. Someone muttered, "Oh, hell." Claire's face drained of color. Jake's grin collapsed into something feral. "What the hell are you doing?" he barked, stepping forward. "Showing everyone what you've been doing," I shot back. I held the papers high, flipping through them. Messages, hotel receipts, even a still photo from the nanny cam. Each page hit like a hammer on steel. 2 years of calling me brother while you crawled into my house. 2 years of lying to my feet, both of you. Murmurs spread like fire. A neighbor's phone was already up, recording. Claire reached out, eyes wide. "Mark, please." "Don't," I cut her off, my voice slicing. "You had your chance to be honest. Now you can live with the truth in daylight." Jake lunged to snatch the papers, but I pulled back, then slid the USB drive into the hand of one of his cousins standing by the speaker. "Plug it in," I said coldly. "Let everyone see the home movie." The cousin, wide-eyed, did it without hesitation. Seconds later, the Bluetooth speaker cut off, and the backyard TV lit up with the footage. Claire opening the back door, Jake stepping in. Their kiss caught crystal clear. The crowd went dead silent. The sound of their laughter in the video filled the yard like poison gas. Claire sobbed, covering her face. Jake turned red, fists clenched, but he couldn't stop the wave. Neighbors whispered, "God almighty, ain't that his best friend?" Phones recorded every second. "This is my life," I said, pointing at the screen. "The marriage I believed in. The friend I trusted more than blood. That's what you've made of it." Jake tried to laugh it off. "Man, you're blowing this way out of proportion," I barked, stepping into him. "You think sneaking into my house, my marriage bed, is just a joke? You think my vows are a punchline?" The video rolled on, every second another nail in their coffin. A beer bottle slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the patio. Claire wailed, "Please stop, you're humiliating me." "No," I said, voice steady now. "You did that yourself. I'm just letting the world see it." The climax hit like thunder when the footage ended, and silence hung heavy. Then, from the back of the yard, an older neighbor shook his head and muttered, "Sometimes the trash takes itself out." Laughter cracked the tension, sharp and merciless. Phones stayed raised, recording the aftermath. Claire collapsed into a lawn chair, shaking, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Jake stormed off toward his truck, curses trailing like exhaust. Nobody followed him. Nobody stopped me when I walked to the cooler, pulled out a Bud Light, cracked it open, and let the hiss mark the end of the show. I didn't feel triumph, not yet. Just a hollow, aching release, like air finally escaping a balloon that's been stretched too long. But as I walked away, leaving the humiliated wreckage behind me, I knew one thing. The reveal was done. The masks were gone. And now came the part no one in the crowd would ever see. The quiet wreckage, the divorce, the healing, the way a man stitches himself back together when the world stops clapping. The barbecue ended with Claire sobbing into her hands, Jake peeling out of his own driveway while neighbors filmed the smoke from his tires, and me walking away with the taste of Bud Light and ash in my mouth. But the true aftermath, the kind that lingers long after the humiliation moment has faded from the gossip cycle, is quieter. It shows up in paperwork, in long hours alone, in the way a house feels too big when one voice is gone. That night, after Duke curled up by my boots and the silence pressed in, I sat at the kitchen table with the divorce papers I'd already drawn up weeks before. All I had to do was sign, slide them into an envelope, and tomorrow the process would begin. Divorce is less cinematic than the movies, or even those revenge stories that light up Reddit. It's court dates, splitting bank accounts, arguing over furniture you don't even like, and deciding who gets Duke on weekends if it comes to that. Claire tried to call me the next morning, 5 times. I didn't answer. By noon, she showed up at the house, eyes red, makeup smeared, voice small. "He doesn't want me," she whispered on the porch. "He said I was just fun. He told me to get lost." She reached for me, like I might catch her as she fell. I stepped back. "Not my problem anymore," I said. My voice was flat, but inside it shook like glass on a shelf. Seeing her broken didn't heal me. It only showed me how little I mattered to her until the world tossed her aside. She begged, promised she'd change, even offered to go to counseling, but the folder of texts, the video footage, the smell of another man's cologne still clinging to her hair, I couldn't unsee, unhear, unlive any of it. I handed her the envelope. This is where we're at. Court came fast. Texas doesn't draw it out when evidence is clear. The judge barely raised an eyebrow at the stack I provided. Screenshots, receipts, the cam footage. Claire's lawyer tried to spin it as emotional confusion, but the truth is cold in black and white. I got the house, I kept Duke, I paid her nothing, because the adultery clause still means something here. She signed, hand trembling, and I swear the sound of that pen-scratching paper was louder than the gavel. But the healing, that didn't come from the courtroom. It came from mornings on the porch, Duke's head in my lap, coffee steaming in the cool air. It came from the little things. Pancakes on Saturday mornings, just me flipping them while ESPN hummed in the background. Catching a Cowboys game alone without pretending to care about someone else's commentary. Long drives down 75 with the windows down, letting the wind scrub my head clean. It wasn't all peace, though. Nights got long. There were moments I reached for her out of habit, only to find empty sheets. Times I wondered if I'd missed red flags earlier, if I was partly to blame for giving too much trust. But slowly, the ache turned from sharp to dull, then into something else. Acceptance. I realized peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means deciding not to let the past set fire to every tomorrow. One evening, my buddy from church dropped by with a six-pack. We sat on the porch, Duke chasing moths, and he said, "Man, I saw the video. I don't know how you kept your cool." I laughed, hollow but real. "Sometimes the trash takes itself out," I told him, and the words felt like armor sliding into place. Claire moved out of state eventually. Word got around she tried to make it work with another guy, but that fell apart too. Jake? Last I heard, his business lost contracts when clients didn't want to deal with a man who'd stab his best friend in the back. People remember. Small towns have long memories. As for me, I kept the HVAC business alive, took on more clients, expanded into commercial work. The guys on my crew said I seemed lighter, even though I was working harder. I started running again, lacing up at dawn, pounding pavement through quiet neighborhoods, letting sweat burn off whatever bitterness clung to me. There's a strange power in realizing you survived what you thought would kill you. One Sunday, months later, I walked into that same diner where Claire and I once celebrated her birthday with pancakes. The neon PIE sign still flickered, stubborn as ever. I ordered a short stack, black coffee, and sat by the window while Duke waited in the truck. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest, just the taste of syrup, the sound of forks on plates, and the quiet hum of life carrying on. People think revenge is the high point of these infidelity stories, that the reveal is the ultimate satisfaction. But the truth is, peace beats revenge every time, because revenge ends when the crowd stops clapping. Peace, that's yours forever. I left the diner, climbed into my truck, and patted Duke's head. The sky stretched wide and blue over Texas, and I thought of a line I'd once heard from some old man at a barbecue, the kind that sticks with you like smoke in your clothes. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to breathe again once it's gone.